will gather you from in which God, your God, has dispersed you. And when the Torah is talking about the dispersion of the Jewish people, he's not just talking about the people in Hul, the people that are living outside of Eretz Israel, but those that dwell among the nations. In other words, it's not a physical phenomenon, it's also a mental phenomenon. Where is our heads? Where is our consciousness? Where are our intentions? Is it for our kadosh, or are we swayed by the nations of the world? We also have to be removed, just like the people from whom be brought back to God. Okay. So now we'll talk about the present situation, and which doesn't need any description. We know that since in 7/10, 2024, things began to change. They've been changed for years and years and years and years. But when we witness the biggest massacre of Jews at the time of the Holocaust and the confusion afterwards, if you recall all those events, I don't want to go into it. And then after that, the looming threats from Lebanon with their tens of thousands of missiles, and from Iran with it was developing and enriching uranium for a bomb that has Israel written on it, and from all sides, right? And there was the confusion, and then we began to act, and we saw then Israel. We saw a total different change, a total change in the stance of Israel vis-a-vis the nations, where for years we've been that lonely, tiny lamb among the 70 wolves of the nation, and suddenly, right? And suddenly the lion rises as Bibi W. War, and we see that we rule the skies of Lebanon, of Iran. And there's another quotation, by the way, in Micha, where Micha says at the end of times that Israel will be a lion among the animals of the forest, and wherever it steps, it destroys, and it's fearful. So we saw that also. We saw the miracles that the Kadosh Baruch Hu wrought for us, right? The missiles that never arrived here, that barrage, that famous huge barrage of missiles, of deadly missiles, that had almost no effect here whatsoever. But if we look now at current events, we see that of course it's a bit of a zigzag, because now I don't want to go. Everybody knows what's happening again in Iran, right? Things, it's business again. It returns the business of uranium enrichment and receiving help from China. And in Lebanon also, there's still skirmishes, and in particular, Gaza. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today are these three locations. We're going to examine the roots of these conflicts in the Torah. These are the three focal points, right, in the war. And we'll see what it tells us about their strength, and we'll see what it tells us about the kind of tshuva that's indicated by the nature of the evil of these three nations. Okay. First of all, Lebanon. Lebanon is a part of Eretz Israel. All of Lebanon is actually Eretz Israel. And then we see in the time when the land was divided between the tribes, that the Shevet Asher and also Asher reached up beyond even Beirut. Actually, it's all of ours and until Turkey. But nonetheless, there was no real, in the time of the first Beit Medrash and second Beit Medrash, we settled it, but not very sparsely. What's the connection between us and Lebanon? It all began in the time of Yehuda, the son of Yaakov. Do you remember that he had a friend, Hira? Remember Hira? Right? Had a friend. Well, this Hira, the Midrash says, lived more than 1,000 years. And he became the Hiram Melech Sur, the king of Tyre, which was really ruled Lebanon at that time. And even though we see that he befriended David, and he sent to David when David wanted to build a palace. He sent David cedars and copper and carpenters. But after that, there was a change in him. Why? Because when he heard that Shlomo the king, wanted to build the Beit Medrash, here he walked. He wasn't interested in the construction of the Beit Medrash. By the way, he built his own Beit Medrash. I won't go into it now, but he was a master of the occult art. He was a master of the side of people. Sometimes he aided Israel. Sometimes he opposed Israel. Let's see what he did. So when Shlomo HaMelech needed the cedars to build the Beit Hamikdash, which ultimately he got from him, he refused. So what did Shlomo HaMelech do? He put him in Gehinnom, and he wrote him a letter it's for 7 days, Tshuva. And after 7 days, so he acquiesced, he appeared, he comes out of Gehinnom, and he begins to send the cedars with which Shlomo HaMelech built the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, on hold 410 years, he's behaving himself, but then at the time of the construction of the Beit HaMikdash, again he reveals his true colors, because it's written in the book of Yechezkel. Book of Yechezkel explains to us the power of Hiram. Actually, according to some sources, he was in Gan Eden even. He had the capacity to rise to the heights of spirituality, but when he heard about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, so he was filled with glee. And he says, I will be filled with the one that is laid waste. What did he say? Now, if Yerushalayim falls, all the power of Kedusha, right, it will be transferred. It will be transferred to me. In other words, I will experience this tremendous, the Klipo, the Klipa, will experience this tremendous aggrandizement by the fact that the Beit HaMikdash fell because of the sins of the Jewish people. Now, the interesting thing, you have to remember this is recorded. Does anybody remember? It's in Rashi, in Parshat Toldot, when Rivka comes to Shem and she wants to know what's going on in my stomach. There's rioting here, kicking and struggling, and he explains to her because two nations are in your womb, and they will be two nations that will be opposite one to the other. When one rises, the other falls. So what's he talking about? The two nations, basically Esav, Yaakov, Kedusha, impurity, goodness, evil, there, and really, but who's the one? Which element here is the most important? Yaakov or Esau? Obviously, it's the goodness, because what happens actually is we're the people that wear the side of goodness, of holiness of Yaakov. We are the ones that really are directing the show, because what happens when we err, when we sin, right? All the sins that we talk about, Shamim, Bagadim, Zam, Ule, we commit what is called in Hebrew an avera. Everyone knows that term, right? Avera. The word avera is sort of like a transfer. It means to transfer from one thing, goes from one side over to the next side. That's, by the way, la'avor. That's the word over in English. In other words, the moment that we transgress the will of our kadosh Baruch Hu, the power of our nefesh elokit is lost from us, and is picked up by the other side, and it strengthens the other side. So the other side is really getting their power from us, and this we learn from Hiram. That's why it says, that's why Rashi Hiram, who says, oh, wow, the Beit Hamikdash is destroyed. Now I'm going to become the powerful one. Actually, he was a Kodesh Baruch who took care of him. but it also explains to us, first of all, the real crucial that we have to keep in mind, that when God forbid we transgress, we do the wrong thing, and we throw off the yoke of heaven. It's not an individual affair. It's nothing that happens in our Dalai mode and nobody feels it. The whole world feels it. The whole, as they say, the whole, not just this world, but all worlds, they're all on the back of the Jewish people in general, and in each and every Jew in particular, as it's written in the Sefer Tanya. Okay, so let's now go to another home. Iran. There's a midrash. There's a midrash that says, now, if you ask me where it is, I don't know, but I saw it a few years ago, and I'll never forget it. I know I see it on the page, but I don't know what page or which sefer I saw it on. I've been looking through the Nevi'im, but I don't. Every place where I expect to find it, I don't find it. But I know that I saw it 100%. And the midrash says something very interesting. That in the end of days, the Jewish people will return to the same confrontation with Paras that was in the time of Haman, the Shoshana Beva, when he wanted to annihilate the Jewish people, right? As when he comes to Ahasuerus and he said, Lashmid, Ularob, Ulaabed, complete annihilation. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. What's Iran? Total annihilation. It's the one threat from all the nations of the world. They want to dispose us. They want to get us out of here, throw us into the ocean, take a boat, get rid of us. But they're not there. That's not enough for Iran. The klipat of Haman, the klipat of Amalek. I want to see them turned into absolute dust. Very interesting. So what do we learn from this? Two things. Number one, what was the source really? Why? What was missing in the Jewish people? What was their deficiency? That was wrong with them, that God forbid, there was suddenly this decree, this kitrug against the Jewish people to utterly destroy them. And we see one thing was that when Haman comes to Ahasuerus, so he says that there is a nation, there's one nation, and they are different from any other people on earth, and they're also spread around. They're different, but in these words, it can also be interpreted that there's no achdut in the because it's achdut is the secret of the Segula. The Segula. Segula means something that Segula is a word that doesn't have any English translation. There's nothing, the uniqueness of the Jewish people. The fact that the Jewish people exist above and over nature. It's at a time when there's achdut. Our very nature, the depths of our nature is, as it says in the Zohar, that Oraita, Kuchibuhu, Yisrael, Kulahad, we're all united with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But when are we united with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and united with the Torah? When we are in a stance of achdut, which means what? It's not just when you go and you join, a chorus, or you sing together, or you feel good together. It's at that times when you don't feel good about somebody or some other people, right? It's to break down the resistance that we have to other people, to love them as we should, as we love ourselves, right? And no less. And as David HaMelech says, and we quote that phrase every Shabbos at Mincha, Hashem, first of all, the Tefillah says, you are one, and your name is one, and then it quotes David HaMelech. And who is like the Jewish people, that they are one people, even here in the Aretz, in the Artziut, the materiality is something that separates people. I am me and you are you, and we don't feel we feel the bodies, not the souls. but David HaMelech says, it's Yisrael is a goy. We're still, even in that kind of a situation where everything is against our consciousness of being, that we're really together, we're really one soul, actually, right? Even so, even in that, we can be one. And that's the secret also of redemption. You know, it's told, there's a story told about the third Rebbe of Chabad, who was called the Tzemach Tzedek. And Tzemach Tzedek used to go to Petersburg. He was often called to Petersburg at the time of the Russia, Tsar's Russia, because there were tremendous decrees against the Jewish people. And he went there always to annul the decrees, to try to annul the decrees. And there was in one instance, it was clear that his life was really endangered. And his sons were very worried, more than any other excursion to Petersburg. They were worried about this one. And he turned to them and he said, "And if something happens to me, don't worry, because your achdut is enough to bring the world to Mashiach, right? Achdut is enough, just achdut." Okay, let's. There's another point about paras that we learned from them also is, perhaps you heard this or you haven't heard this, but the Jewish people during that 1 year where the decree of utter annihilation was still in the air, was still in power, the Toketh. It's written in Hasidut that the entire Jewish people, listen to this, for 1 year, had reached a point in Tshuva, a connection with the godliness, that they didn't have one external thought about anything in the world except God. Their minds were completely riveted on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Their minds, their emotions, their actions. And it's also for us too. Every time we think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the more we think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're going to see the better we become, right? It's an antidote to those bad character traits that we have. It's the source of good actions and good behavior. So let's learn from them too. That's another point in Tshuva. And now we're going to come to Gaza. Okay? Here we are, the nucleus of the world at war with Israel. And the facts are amazing when you look at it, when you ponder it, when you examine it. If Israel is just a tiny segment of the landmass of the world, in other words, it's 22,000 square kilometers. You know that? That's all. Right. So Gaza is 360 square kilometers. And yet, it exhibits a disproportional gravitational force on the entire world. It commands world attention. You know, it's like the nations of the world revolve like satellites around it, you know? They don't pay any attention to the news that comes out of Gaza, to the fact that Holocaust that we saw there, that doesn't bother them. To all the proofs don't move them. The question is, what explains the devotion of the world to the Palestinian cause? And with all the logic in the world doesn't help. Okay, so let's try to understand what's going on in Gaza. Okay, we have to understand. So let's go back in history, see what the Torah tells us. All the answers are in the Torah. Okay, first I'll begin with Avram Avinu. Now, when everyone is familiar with what is called Eretz Uplifting in the Torah, right? Eretz Uplifting, it's today's Gaza, but it extends beyond the borders of today's Gaza, right? And includes outlying areas. But nonetheless, when we talk about Eretz Uplifting, we're talking also about Gaza, force of Gaza. What's that? Plishtim, which is called the name of the Palestinians Palestinians. It's not the same people. It's the same klipa. The same klipa. It has the klipa of the Plishtim, which we'll learn about now, and it has all the klipa of Amalek. So, okay. So Avram comes in Pashat Vayera, and we see that he sojourns in Gaza, and then he leaves. And afterwards, Avimelech comes to him, and he acknowledges. He says like this to Avram, that God is with you and all that you do. I'm aware of that. So 1 second. So let's make a treaty, okay? Since I was good to you, I want you to be good to me. And he says, swear to me by God that you will not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my grandson. And Abraham Avinu swears to him. It's a treaty, a very problematic treaty, as we're going to see. And he sets apart 7 ewes, female sheep, and he says, and this is a testimony that I made this treaty with you, and the treaty is also on the well that Abraham Avinu dug, and it's his, and Abimelech acquiesces. The sages tell us about that oath, that those 7 sheep that Abraham Avinu, which they say, is placed aside for the reasons why they gave the Plishtim the power to kill 7 great tzaddikim. Power over 7 great tzaddikim were murdered because of these 7 sheep. Shimshon, what? What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. Mike? Okay. So, I hope you heard it. You should have told me before. These 7 sheep represent 7 tzaddikim that the Plishtim murdered over time. Number 1 was Eli. Eli, the high priest of Shiloh, remember him? And his 2 sons, Shimshon HaGibor. We'll learn about him in a second. And also Shaul and his 2 sons. In the last battle, Shaul's last battle against Plishtim. They weren't all. They're called tzaddikim. They're called tzaddikim. No, that's right. No, that's one side of it. Right. I'm quoting the Midrash. Okay. In the words of the Midrash has a reason for dubbing them. Okay. And later on, we're going to see them. Right. The same oath that Avraham Avinu made. The same treaty that he made, he swore to them. You're going to see the problem, another problem that's going to crop up. When David HaMelech comes to Yerushalayim, and he wants to conquer what's called today Ir David. Ir David is, no. Ir David, what they talk about today, is just a part of Ir David. Ir David extends to where David HaMelech is buried. He's not buried, by the way, where you think he is, but he's buried in that compound, and that's also Ir David. Okay, in fact, it probably extends even to places outside of it. In any case, remember what David? Do you remember what happens there? Why can't he conquer Ir David? Does anybody remember? What's there?
They're still under the oath. They're still the same.
Yeah, but what do we see there? So we see there that the city is filled with is many. The Midrash talks about many things. That there were 2 big statues there. One were called the blind and the lame, right? The blind and the lame, and they and daily they would announce that David won't come to the city. He cannot conquer Ir David. Others say that there were statues, or many statues. Also of the lambs of ewes of Avraham Avinu. But who are these? Who is the lame and who is the blind? Right? Avimelech made a treaty with Abraham about his son and his son and his grandson. Abraham, on the other side, Avraham Avinu has a son and a grandson. Who is his son? Yitzhak, who was blind, right? And who was his grandson? Yaakov, who was lame, right? So the power of Now, of course, it's not that David Melech could not, but they're existing a certain effect, a certain power on Ir David that David has to conquer it, and it wasn't such a simple matter. Okay, so that's what happens. That's the end of that's the what should I say, the consequences of Avraham Avinu's treaty. But now let's go to Yitzhak Avinu. Yeah, sure.
Why is Abraham and all the that it said they kept it, but the other they pleased him, didn't they?
What do you want? Because we're Jews and they're pleasing. It's a very simple answer, because Jews have a word, because Jews are truthful, because Jews are honest, because
What?
right. I know. Well, obviously, that there was a reason why. To go into the answer your question is something I can't do. Just a moment.
Is there a place to look?
What?
Look up the answer.
Why we made treaties?
Well, I mean, the fact that they look it on Oslo. Yes, look on Oslo. You said there's reason why.
No, it's obvious. It's obvious because we're Jews and they're not, And
yeah, but they believe in Allah.
No, but what does it matter? What does it matter? When it comes to self-interest, there's no belief. There's only themselves. Right, exactly. Okay, let's get into let's go on. Let's take a look now. Let's go now to Yitzhak Avinu. It's written in Pashat Todot. Vayelech Yitzhak el Avimelech Gerara. So Yitzhak Avinu, because it's a famine in the land, and because he, as we know, because he was sacrificed, he was offered up as a pure sacrifice. So he can't leave Eretz Israel. So he goes to the Eretz Plishtim. And the sages say like this: he goes to Gerar. The place is called Gerar, and the sages say Gerar le Gardiki. Gardiki, the closest word in Aramaic is a klipa. It's a klipa. Gra, in other words, the Eretz Plishtim, Azza. What is it? It's a klipa. Let's see what the sages say about it. They say like this: that its very earth, it's air, the people, everything that's built there is tamei, and it's tamei mate. And the sages, therefore, he points out here in the Midrash, they decreed that this part of the country doesn't have the same sanctity as Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is considered to be kadosh, right? It's connected to, it's a whole. It's a place where it says that it's not good. It's not good for anything. It's not good for seed planting. It's not good for harvesting. It's not good for anything, because there's something very evil there. By the way, I had firsthand witness. My daughter, who today is Badnik, but she was, at that time she wanted to go to the army. That was fine. She served in Gaza, and it was interesting. Every time she come home, she said, "Ima, there's something I don't understand. Eve, I feel the evil emitted by the earth there. Mommy, she's very sensitive. And she said it over and over and over again. And it's true. Here, the sages say it's like tumah. It's like the same tumah of a dead person in a tent. Tumat mate, the tumah of a dead person. Okay. Nonetheless, when Yitzhak, who is all kedusha, comes there, so he plants it, right? And what happens, right? Surprise of surprises. So his earth produces 100-fold expected crops, but more than that, right? The force of kedusha, the force of Kisakavina, the force of the avot, that they were shari to Kodesh Baruch, that all their lives they were absolute, in a state of absolute self-abnegation, self-nullification, because in front of a Kodesh Baruch who gives them the power to connect the Kedusha and to turn this. It's not just a wasteland, it's only utter evil that begins to produce under the force of Kedusha. But there's even a bigger surprise in that. Gush Katif, right? That's what happened. You remember Gush Katif? You see that? Do you remember the pictures, the movies of how? What happened there was it was like to see the Holocaust all over again. The burning of the synagogues, the destruction of the synagogue, the menorah being carried out. But let's not go. I want to go further because we don't.
There, it's the Jews.
That was the Jews. That's the point. What's that?
So we were not supposed to live there in comfort or?
No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that that's what it was. But when the Jew comes with kedusha, right, it's something different. You know, that's the point.
Does that mean that the Jews here gave the power of evil to turn around?
What's that?
Does that mean that the Jews gave more power to evil or gave the power?
No, God forbid. It gave the power no, he submitted to it. It had to submit itself to the kedusha of Yitzhak.
Now?
And now, okay, we're going to meet now, okay? So we're going, okay? But there's a bigger surprise in Gaza. Okay. Remember that Yitzhak Avinu dug wells. Remember? That was a whole, okay, so I want to quote to you what the Rambam says. Let's understand what Ramban says about these wells. Ramban al Torah, who's speaking about the Be'erot of Yitzhak. And he says that the Torah narrates us, the Torah tells us the story of Yitzhak digging the wells, and it also goes into a relatively lengthy explanation. And it's not quite understood, right? Why does it spend so much time talking about the wells of Yitzhak? They gave him it was such a great feat to dig wells? Did it honor him? Do we see his greatness because of that? Rather, it's talking to us about the secret of those wells. It's telling us something about what will be in the future, about when Yitzhak digs the last well, he calls it a be'er mayim hayim, a well of living waters. The well of living waters is an appellation for the Beit Mikdash. Those 3 wells that he built, that he dug, all of them were like the primary building construction of the Beit Mikdash, the first, second, and third. And where was it? Under the afar, under the earth of Gaza. Okay? Under Gaza. Right. That's the secret. That's what the Rambam said.
Just say that.
So and I will go to.
You say that, yeah.
What's that?
We need you to say that again.
I'm saying that. So the Rambam has a query here. Why does it why does it waste its breath in describing the wells of Yitzhak? Did it offer him in kind of grandeur, glory? What's so important about digging wells? So then he explains that exclamation of Yitzhak after he builds a well, we found living waters. So he indicates to us, the Rambam is obviously based upon some kind of midrash, it's not recorded here, explains to us that these 3 wells that he dug under the earth of Gaza, all of them correlate to the first, second, and third Beit Mikdash. What he's doing there really is like the groundwork, the first thing, the groundwork of building the Beit Mikdash. Where is it? Under Gaza. What's that?
What's
The correlation?
What's the
connection? Well, you can see it also in their names, which is Eshek, Sitma, and Rehovot. I don't want to go into it now. It's it's really a subject for another class. It's really fascinating, but that's the point. Because do we have an explanation for this? I mean, it's something beyond really human reasoning. One would never come to this by himself, right? It's something you can't apply that logic. But this is what he's doing here under Asa. Well, understand. Let's go on. Let's go on with the history of Asa. Maybe we'll understand why specifically there. Okay, let's go on. All right. So that's Yitzhak Avinu. Is that right? Next stop, Shimshon HaGibor. Shimshon is not for us, but we've often portrayed in common folklore as a kind of a reckless hero drawn after his eyes. This went after his eyes, and therefore he was punished by his eyes being forged out. And he was a woman, a womanizer. But the truth is, a womanizer, right? Well, but there was a reason for that. Why he married 3 women from the Plishtim. Even let's take a look at what Yaakov Avinu says about when Yaakov Avinu in Pashat. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, in Yaakov Avinu in Pashat Vayechi, when he blesses the tribes. Yes, Yaakov Avinu, he blesses the tribes before he dies, all his sons, in Pashat Vayechi. And right after Yehuda, which is the Shevet of Melech HaMashiach, the Shevet of Mashiach, he comes to Dan, because there's a connection between Melech HaMashiach from Yehuda and the Mashiach from Dan. Let's listen. And he says like this, to introduce to you who Shimshon was. He says about the Shevet Dan, Dan Yedin et Amo Ke'echad, and this judge of Dan will judge the Jewish people like Ke'echad, like Yechido Shel Olam, like the unique one in the world, that he was so just and so good that his judgments as a judge were like those of Kadosh Baruch Hu himself. And his very name, Shimshon, means what? Do you know what it means? What does Shimshon mean? It's from the word Shemesh, and Shimshon means a little son. But what's the significance of Shemesh? Because there's a verse in Tehillim, Ki Shemesh umagen havai elokim. Shemesh in this world, the sun, is an analog in this world of Havaya. So again, his root, the root of his soul was tremendously high, and in this very strange character of Shimshon, who's really bizarre, there's this great kedusha. And when Yaakov, in the middle of his blessing, what does he, by the way, he says here, Yaakov says at the end of his blessing to the tribe of Dan, Lishu'ata kiviti Hashem. It's the only time in all the blessings that we hear the word Havaya. Lishu'ata kiviti Havaya. Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Everybody knows that, right? When I say Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei. And why does he ask suddenly, Hashem, for your Yeshua, I request? Because he sees in Ruach HaKodesh, as he blesses the tribe Shimshon, and he sees ultimately that he will be killed by the Plishtim. And he says, if it is not this man who is totally devoted, a man of self-sacrifice, a man of courage, everything he did was by himself. You see, he's a lone wolf. Everything he did by himself. If he's not the Mashiach, who is? That's exactly what he says. He sees him as a Mashiach. In fact, we're going to find out that he is he's considered to be the Mashiach of the world of Tohu. And he begins the work of Mashiach, as it says, as the angel says to his mother before he gives birth. He talks about the birth of your son, who has to be a Nazarite, etc., etc. And he said to him, V'hu yachel lehoshia et Yisrael miyad haplishtim. He will begin the job of saving the Jewish people from the Plishtim. He will begin the job. He didn't end it. Okay? Now, let's go now. We're going to go now into the Kabbalah. Fascinating. Of the father of the Rebbe. I'm going to, it's really, every word here is important, but I'm going to try to summarize it because I don't want to be too heavy, where he explains something that we don't see in any other place. He points out that Shimshon, if you've seen Shimshon, Shimshon, his second wife, was a woman of ill repute. You know what that means, translate that. He goes to ask, you see this woman, he goes into her house, he marries her, by the way. The Rambam says that he converted and married everybody. So it was a marriage and a conversion. But this one was a woman of ill repute. Okay, so the Azans, who came back now to Azza, to the heir to Plishtim. Okay, so they want to ambush him in the morning when he leaves the house. But Shimshon picks up on it, so he leaves the house at midnight, which is the time of Skula. He leaves the house and he goes out, and knowing the importance of this place, he takes out the gate of Az's city, the whole gate, and the doorposts, and the bolt. And the sages say in the Gemara and Sota that we have a tradition that the gates were no less than 60 amot in width. And he puts them on his shoulders. Says Shimshon had shoulders. The width of shoulder was, according to the Midrash, was also 60 amot. He puts them on his shoulders, takes them out of Azza, goes to the east, I don't know, 20 kilometers to the Mount of Hebron, goes up with this on his shoulders, the power of Shimshon, which was, power of HaKadosh Baruch himself. He goes up the mountain and he places them on the mountain facing Hebron. What did he do here? So the Father Rebbe, the great Kabbalist Levi Yitzchak, explains that the gates, that actually Azza is the womb of the Lumatze, the womb of the Lumatze, the womb, W-O-M-B, womb of impurity, womb of evil. And these gates are like the gates to the womb, right? In other words, he wants to rip it asunder. He wants to leave now Azza that anybody can come and conquer, right? The gates represent, right, the protection of Azza, the strength of Azza. And he brings them and he places them on top of the mountain. In other words, he's trying to achieve an ascent of the people, a correction, a rectification of the people, to bring them back to their source. And he puts them on the mountain facing Hebron. What's important about Hebron? Hebron is the city of the Avot, right? The Avot, as we said before, the Avot are called, the Zohar says, the Avot are the chariot of a Kodesh Baruch. Just as a chariot doesn't feel itself, it's directed only by that who's riding on it. So the Avot, they have it was 1 second of their life where they really had, they entertained a thought of themselves. And therefore it's utter bitul. So what is then the correction, rectification of Azza? Utter bitul to HaKadosh Baruch. That means that what's written in Shulchan Aruch, what's there is one-on-one. There's no quibbling about it. Okay, but let's go back now. So he explained something very interesting. The width of Shimshon's, the gates were 60 amot wide, which is 30 yards wide. And they constitute the absolute antithesis of the Beit HaMikdash, which is the womb of Kedusha. The Beit HaMikdash, when you give the measurements of the Beit HaMikdash, it was 60 amot long, right? It's exactly, one is against the other. In other words, you understand the power of Azza now? It's Zelu Matzeh. It's Beit HaMikdash opposed by Azza. When we correct ourselves, we'll be able to build the Beit HaMikdash. Azza will fall totally. And all the time that it's producing, like vermin, or Hamasdikim, and commanding world power, it's because of the power that's being emitted from the womb of Azza. The Beit HaMikdash is amazing. It's a mash. This is the secret of Azza. And if you want something very interesting, when at the time of Hitnatkut, remember Hitnatkut, the expulsion from Isaac? Do you know that the original decree, a decree to expel the Jews from Gush Katif, it was signed for when? Tisha B'Av, the time of the right? The Beit Mikdash, the destruction of the Beit Mikdash. Ma'am. Find your minutes? Oh, no. Okay, the same. All right. So now I just want to go to the last thing. Of the power of the Plishtim, let's take a look very briefly. Now I have 5 minutes, so 5 minutes, so I'll finish. Be'ezrat Hashem. We see them later on. Plishtim were the only people. Once in history, the Ark of the Covenant was stolen, was captured, was kidnapped. Once in history, the Ark of the Covenant. What's in the Ark of the Covenant? The tablets of law, which is the essence of godliness, the essence of the Torah. Who was it captured by? The Plishtim. They destroyed Shiloh, right? Number one. Where two today? Where do you know where the Ark of the Covenant is? Beside this, many hymns of the Gemara. It's in Yerushalayim under Har HaBayit, where Shlomo's secreted. Shlomo built a special place for it. But who's on Har HaBayit? Who's also still sitting on it? Right? The Arabs. In particular, the power is the power of the Palestinians. Let's go to David HaMelech, right? David HaMelech, in his first, once he was anointed the king, but in secrecy by Shmuel, and when he comes to the battlefield, he was sent by his father just to give his brothers food. And who does he see there? Goliath HaPlishti, who was the main enemy of the Jewish people. So his power was so frightening, was so terrifying, that we see Shaul, Yonatan, Avner, the great Avner, all those tzaddikim there in the sidelights cowering. Nobody wants to respond to the duel that he offers them. 40 days he comes out, except David HaMelech. Because why? Why with Goliath? Why with the Plishtim? Because every time that the Malchut of a Kodesh Baruch Hu has to rise, there is a conflict with the Plishtim. We see this again when before David HaMelech comes to Yerushalayim, after he was received by all the people in Hebron as their king. So he goes there's a war there in between, and the war was of the Plishtim. Why? Because they smell again. Malchut is on the rise. And this is what we oppose. Malchut, which is the Beit Mikdash, which is represented by the Beit Mikdash. So we're there to oppose it. By the way, the Rebbe talks about the beginning of the Arab riots, if I'm not mistaken, the early 70s. And the Rebbe says, why are they suddenly, what's this awakening about? What's going on about it? Because they smell now that Mashiach is on the way. They know that their end is close. And an amazing thing also, I have to finish with that. Another amazing thing before I leave Gaza. My grandson, who was in the commando unit of Givati, served in Gaza, told me every time when he doesn't always put the finger, but every time he put the finger, he killed terrorists that day. And he told me, Safta, you go into every house in Gaza and you see the same thing. He asked me a question. I said, what? Yes, I'm thinking. Tea service, carpet. What do you see? He said, no, a picture of El Aqsa. A picture of El Aqsa, which is the mosque. You understand? There in Gaza, not in Lebanon, Gaza, you see that even sometimes when they speak against the backdrop of that, because there's something in their blood, something tells them. They're the embodiment of the people of Gaza. And David, understanding the power of that klipa, he writes in the very first verse of Tehillim. The very first verse, let's see what he quoted there. Asher Ish, right? I'll say it in English. Fortunate is the man who did not go in the counsel of the wicked, nor he stood in the path of the sinners, nor sat in the company of scoffers, of leitzim, are scoffers, people who take things really easy. And the Admor, the second Rebbe of Chabad, says like this: Who are the company of scoffers? Those are the Plishtim. The Klipa Plishtim. Why? Because the original Klipa of the Plishtim, I don't know time to really explain it in depth now, but it's people that the original Klipa is just that instead of a Jew being all the time riveted on a Kodesh Baruch Hu and serious about a Kodesh Baruch Hu and sensing Yirat Shemayim in his heart, he begins to take things a bit light. You know? Let's take it easier. You know, it's to be so serious. And he explains that that is the root of all evil. That's where we sin. That's where we err. That's where we make mistakes. And it was so significant. And David understood this. And that's why he ends the very first verse in the Sefer of Tehillim with scoffers. Don't that, you want to keep yourself together with a Kadosh Baruch Hu. You want to return to a Kadosh Baruch Hu Teshuva, right? We're ready to do what the soldiers are doing on battle. 900 tzaddikim, gemurim, complete tzaddikim already fell. They gave everything. What are we doing in the back lines? It has to be a correlation. And just as the Gemara says, if it weren't for Yoav that went out to battle, David could not learn in Yerushalayim and teach and pray. And if it weren't for David, who was in Yerushalayim learning and with his students in the yeshiva and davening and involved in the performance of mitzvot, Yoav would never have achieved. We're together. We have to have the same kind of mesirut nefesh, and it's a bit harder because we're not on the battle line. We don't see it, and that's a ma'ala that we have here, because we give them the power. They're all of it, tzaddikim, but we're also giving the power. Just as they need food, just as they need clothing and tents and helmets and water and food, they need the support of us. They need our tshuva. Okay? That's all.
This is like a down payment. Okay, I think we're gonna take a 5-minute break. We're gonna start.
Nice to see you. Haven't seen you in years. I haven't seen you.
5 minutes.